at Centralia, and they it didn't really occur to me till yesterday evening, because they had said something about Jacob Nelly wouldn't see us today or this morning because Jacob is in Centralia preaching, and it kind of dawned on me that David had to teach, and I'm sure they would like to have gone up and listened to Jacob as well. So I told him, let me know if you want me to teach, and they could go up there. So he texted me last night and asked me if I would take this, and thankfully it's an easy section of Scripture. I've read it before, so it's okay. Genesis 18, Genesis 21, Genesis 22, which is lesson 7 of our book, Abraham and Sarah's promised son. And so we're going to go through that class in session today. So I appreciate your comments as always. One thing that I like about these books, I do a little bit different with them than everybody else may do. Instead of just kind of reading through the book and then answering the questions, I like to answer the questions as we go through the reading, because my mind instantly goes to some of these things as we're talking about it. And I was reading it again last night because I'm teaching downstairs, and so I didn't dig too much into it last couple of weeks. But I was reading it again last night, and as I'm reading through the text of this book, I'm thinking, well, here's a question I want to ask you, or here's something I want to discuss. And then I get to the discussion questions, and that's what they all are. So me and the author's on the same wavelength here. So, hi, Roger. Good to see you. Yeah, no sudden movements around Roger and make him turn his head. But good to see you. You doing all right? Wonderful, wonderful. All right. So, Abraham and Sarah's promised son. I want to go back and start really primarily with Genesis 12 and the call of Abraham and those promises that were made to him all those years ago. There are 3 big promises that God made to Abraham. Of course, the land promise, the land that he would give to him, fulfilled ultimately with Joshua and the conquest of Canaan. And so that land promise, I say fulfilled ultimately, started with Joshua, ultimately with Solomon. The borders of the kingdom of Israel were at their greatest during that time and included everything God said he would give them. So that part of the promise had been fulfilled with Joshua and ultimately through Solomon. But also the promise of this great nation. I'll make you a great nation. I will bless you, make your name great. This is Genesis 12:2. You'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now, we know from our New Testament study, we're ultimately leading to Jesus, of course, but that promise in verse 2, I will make you a great nation. If you put yourself in Abraham's shoes for a moment, there's you, there's your wife, you have a nephew and his family, your father's died, you have servants, he has quite a few servants, as we're very well aware of. But you can imagine by the time you get to the end of the book of Genesis, and you've gone through the lineage of Abraham to that point, you've got Isaac, you've got Jacob, you've got the 12 sons, you've got their families. The end of Genesis tells us 70 people went down into Egypt during the famine, and Joseph brought 70. That was the entire family, 70 people. And so, how do you make a nation out of 70 people? Well, there would be God's work, God's intervention, and God's providence working through this all. But if you even back that up just a little bit from the 70 that Joseph helped save, back through Jacob, before Jacob and his family, before Isaac and Jacob and Esau, when you get back just to Abraham, and it's you and Abraham, you and your wife, and you have no children, and it doesn't appear that you're going to be able to have any children, how do you react to a promise where I will make of you, through your seed, I'll make you a great nation. We need to put ourselves in his shoe for a moment, and Sarah's shoes for just a moment, because we're going to read a passage here in Genesis 18 about the promise that's made to them and how Sarah reacts to that. And it shouldn't surprise us. I've got some ideas about it. I want to hear your ideas about it as well. But when you think about children in that day and age, how important was it for a couple to have children, especially male children? So, the lineage continues on. And it's hard for us to understand, to some degree, the position society looked at when it came to children. For us today, it may be the case that there are couples who don't have children, unable to have children, various reasons why. Last research said that about 10 to 20% of all cases of individuals who can't have kids, there's no reason behind it. Now, there are health reasons, there's psychological reasons, social reasons, financial reasons, but there was about 10 to 20% where they were unable to have children. And for us as a society, we don't we look at those situations and we don't look at it the same way they did in the days of Abraham and Sarah. I remember the time, of course, our kids get married, and the first thing we're thinking of is, well, we're going to start having a bunch of grandkids. And I remember the time that Ben and Sue Ann finally called us and said, we hope you enjoy the dog, that's your grandchild. That she'd be unable to have kids. And you think about situations like that. Of course, they do. They had one. It's funny because she works for the state as an auditor, state of Tennessee, and they got a pretty big bonus, and they were getting ready to take the money they got for the bonus and start the adoption process, and then found out she was pregnant. So it wasn't even in their minds to have that. But that happens quite a bit, it seems like. But for us, we at that point said, well, we love that dog. And if you decide to adopt, we'll love that child. And so our society today has a little bit of a different view of it than it did then. For them, it was to carry on the family name, to carry on the lineage. They looked at children as a blessing from God, and the more children you could possibly have, the more blessed you would be. A little bit later on, when it comes to Jacob, you remember how many, silly question, trick question, how many kids does Jacob have? At least 13, 12 sons and one daughter. It may have had more daughters too, but only one is mentioned with Dinah. So they have children, but you look at the whole dynamic between Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah, and you look at what Leah's response is to having kids. She has Reuben, and what's her response? Maybe now Jacob will love me. And so I'm going to have another kid, and maybe now he'll treat me right. Maybe now he'll care about me. And so they use children as a way of status in society, status within the family. Of course, motherhood was connected with honor in that society, in that day and age. Ultimately, of course, after we get past Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you get into the promise of the Messiah, women able to have children. It was important to have a male child because this might be the Messiah. And so women wanted to have children for that cause. But not everybody could. And so we have this promise that's made to Abraham and Sarah in Genesis chapter 18. And the first 15 verses, we're going to read down through this and make some comments about this, about the visitors that come and the statements that are made to them. In the very first verse, it says, the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth tree of Mamre as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground and said, my Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass by on your servant. Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh your hearts. After that you may pass by. Inasmuch as you have come to your servant, they said, do as you have said. So Abraham hurried into the tent of Sarah and said, "Quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man. He hastened to prepare it. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. All right, I just want to stop here and make a few comments about this and get your thoughts. Who are these 3 men? At least 2. I would argue at least 2 are angels. The third, you got verse 1, the Lord, which is capitalized probably in your Bibles, which is Jehovah. So this is the personal name of God. The Lord appeared to him, and there were 3 men there. What we're going to find later, we're not reading this in our text today, verses 16 through 33. When Abraham intercedes on behalf of Sodom, who's he speaking to? One of the men. 2 of the men have gone on, but one's left. And this individual that he's speaking with, in verse 17, the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm doing? Since he'll surely become a great and mighty nation, all nations will bless him." And so, verse 20, the Lord said, because the outcry of Sodom. So, this is one of those interesting passages that deal with, I believe, the pre-incarnate Lord. Sometimes we think Jesus didn't exist until Matthew, right? Until he's a baby, he didn't exist. He existed into eternity. And there are occasions throughout the Old Testament you see him popping up, especially when it says the angel of the Lord, especially if the word angel is capitalized. I think that's primarily speaking of that part of the Godhead that is manifesting himself on this earth to speak to his people. Joshua, you remember Joshua as he's getting ready to go into the promised land. He's going to go fight for the land. The commander of the Lord's army stands before him, and he tells him, "Take off your shoes, because where you're standing is holy ground," which is reminiscent to what Moses had to deal with. And so this is not just an angel that's speaking to Joshua, but it's the angel of the Lord. It's the commander of the Lord's army. And sometimes out of the context of those things, you can recognize whether or not this is the Lord or if it's an angel. In that context with Joshua, it's one of my favorite questions. Joshua says, "Who are you? Are you with us or with them?" And he says, "No. I'm not with anybody. You're with me or you're not with me. I'm not on anybody's side." I like how that describes that, because sometimes we can go through life saying, "God's with me." Well, God, are you with me? No. Are you with them? No. We need to be with him rather than him be with us. And so you look at the context of those things. And I think the context in this passage clearly shows us that there are 3 individuals. 2 are angels, because we read about them a little bit later in Genesis, going to Sodom. And then this one that stays behind says things and does things, and Abraham reacts to this individual as deity. And so I think that's who we're dealing with here. A couple of things that may be of no significant value, but I find interesting. How long does it make to take 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes? Take a little while, doesn't it? I remember my grandma making bread. It took her all day. Okay, so how long does it take to, even though it's a tender and good calf, how long does it take to prepare a calf for a meal? I think there's several hours involved here. And so for us, the event is, there's 3 men here. Sarah, make them some food. My young servant, make them this calf. Okay, here it is. I think several hours have passed. And so it's either awkward silence or there's a lot of information that's being given.
And there's no kitchen in the tent. They had to prepare a fire outside.
Prepare the fire, cook it, roast it, even though it's young and tender.
Abraham told Sarah
Quickly. You don't have 3 days here, Sarah. Let's get this done. But so in our minds, and that's the way Genesis runs, of course. We've seen that so many times already. It's just in the process of time or in the moment of time, and it seems to go very quickly, when I think you've probably got a day here, several hours at least, of what's taking place. What conversations did they have? That's always interesting to me. Obviously, it wasn't something that pertained primarily to the promise that's about to be made. So, they're eating this in verse 8. Verse 9, then they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" Oh, wait a minute, by the way. Discussion question number 1. Hebrews 13:2 is sometimes referred to in connection with Abraham's visitors. I don't think sometimes referred to, it is referred to with Abraham's visitors. Let brotherly love continue. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so some have unwittingly or unknowingly entertained angels. Did Abraham know that these two men were angels? Did he know at this point that this was the Lord? Probably not. Other than the fact that Abraham recognizes there are 3 travelers who have stopped at his tent. Their feet are dirty. They look like they could get something to eat. He wants to feed them. He wants to give them something to drink. He wants to give them these cakes. He wants to show hospitality to them. I know maybe the book brings that out to some degree. Did he know that they were special? Did he know that there was something different about it? I don't think so, because of what Hebrews 13:1 and 2 says. That I imagine that if anybody who was a traveler came by and stopped at Abraham's tent, wherever Abraham was, Abraham showed hospitality to them. So our question makes this relevant to, is this verse still relevant to us today? And if so, what possibilities does it suggest? Does anybody have any stand up on the back of your neck stories about entertaining people that kind of made you think later? Showing hospitality to strangers? Is it possible to still entertain angels?
You got a story.
Yeah, it's a good one too. You all remember that? The guy I picked up late at night? Or no, that I helped. I didn't pick up. I went to pick up. Okay, I'll tell you the story then. Again, working at Rax, which I wish they would come back. But the Rax restaurant, late at night in the closing, and a guy had come in. He had been walking for a couple of hours. It was in the wintertime, and he wanted to get warm and have a cup of coffee, and we were closing. And I said, sure. And when we were closing, I asked him, he said, "Do you want some of these hamburgers? We have hamburgers left over." He said, "I don't have any more money." I said, "It doesn't matter. You can have them. We're just going to throw them away." He sat there and ate for a little while, and then he left, and we'd closed the store shortly before that, and he was walking another couple hours. He'd gotten off a train somewhere, and it was a long way to where he was going. And so I decided I would go pick him up, and I can give him a ride a little bit further. Never did find him. Couldn't find who, went that direction where he was walking toward. Couldn't find him. But at that point in my life, I had no direction, had no idea what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And shortly after that, I was encouraged to go to the school of preaching, which I did. I found a wife that I love, and had children and grandchildren, and I believe I'm standing here before all of you because I gave a guy, a complete stranger, a hamburger for free. I can't explain the whole thing adequately to understand that there was something different about this. Nothing made sense. I've heard a lot of stories from people that just don't make sense, and I'm like, okay, they don't make sense because you're not telling me everything. His story just didn't add up because of the nature of it all, of how far he was walking and how cold it was, and having no money and all this. So I think, for me, helping that individual at that time changed the course of my life. So that was that story in a nutshell. Do I stand up here and tell you it was an angel? I can't, because I don't know. I saw, I didn't see any wings pop out. Which, by the way, I don't think angels have wings. But anyway, that's just my own thought. And so, has anything ever happened to you all like that? I'll tell you what, though. I'll say this while you're thinking about it. It changes the way that you look at people. So, an event like that, 30 years ago, changes the way that you look at people who are standing on the side of the street. It changes the way that you view people who come in and are asking for help, because you don't know what's going on or what's at play here. And so, what do you all think about that? What do you think about Hebrews 13, 1 and 2?
I think Jesus can do anything.
For us to say, and that's where I pull back a little bit and have some caution. If I were to say, well, God couldn't do this, God wouldn't send an angel unaware for me to show hospitality to, that's me limiting God, saying God can't do something, and God can do everything. Patty?
I think a lot of times what we call a coincidence is not a coincidence. It's something that maybe was put before us.
I agree. Too often we look at things as fate and chance when maybe it's providence. We're in the right place at the right time, at the right situation to deal with something that needs to be dealt with. And is there a blessing that comes from that? Probably. So it's not necessarily coincidence, as the world may look at it. Yep. Yes. Yeah. For those times, if let brotherly love continue, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for by doing so some have unknowingly entertained angels unaware. If you stuck that somewhere in the Old Testament, I could say absolutely. Some people entertained angels and they didn't know it, or they spoke to angels and they didn't know it. Balaam. Why the donkey starts talking, why there's an angel there. Abraham with these men, why Lot, when they go into Sodom, he's talking to angels. If you took that passage and put it in the Old Testament, you could say there's something there to it, but the fact that it's in the New Testament, and it applies to Christians today, to let brotherly love continue, because you don't know who these people are, and they may be somebody that God sent, and they may be his angels. Some people, I know sometimes we kind of cringe at that, and we say, well, I don't want to sound too crazy and fanatical, but thank God for who came into our lives. Well, they haven't even had a child yet. We need to get on with this. All right, verse 9. Then they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" He said, "Here in the tent." And he said, "I will certainly return to you according to the time of life. And behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age. How old were they at this time?
No, 99.
He was 99 when he had the child. Well, she got pregnant when he was 99. Would have been. Okay, she was 90 when she got pregnant. How old are they now? Between Genesis 18 and Genesis 21. 25 years passes before they have Isaac. So he's in his 70s, which is still incredible. Sarah. So in the right time of season, Sarah will have you'll have a child. Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age. Sarah was well past the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I've grown old, shall I pleasure my Lord, being old also?" And the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh?" And that's why I think it's the Lord and not an angel, because would an angel know that Sarah, who's behind a door or tent that nobody can see and laughs within herself, would an angel know what's in the heart of Sarah? Probably not, but I think the Lord does. Why did Sarah laugh? Anne knows her name, by the way. Saying, "I shall surely bear a child since I'm old. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said, "No, but you did laugh." All right.
No, you did laugh.
I heard you. He laughed inside. I don't think she just bust out laughing that he could hear through the tent. She laughed within herself, and he said, "I heard that," and that's God. Ed?
The question I have, and I know there's an obvious answer, but weren't all Abraham and Sarah told the stories from the time when the first 4 books, and the fact that people were living a long time and they were having children all the
After the flood, there's a limit on age, span of life. And that certainly would have been something that Abraham was familiar with. And just based on experience, not many 100-year-old people having kids. Yeah, even for us today, it seemed, that seems crazy in that idea, because we only, very few can live to 100. But then you have people living to 120, 130. And you think, well, okay, they've still got years left. But even for them, as the text says, they were past the age of childbearing, which I think would have been consistent at that point in Abraham's and the history of the world, would have been consistent, maybe a little bit longer, 40, 50, with what we would consider today. Of course, Adam lives to be 930 years. He doesn't have 3 kids the first 2 years of his life. He has a lot of children and is able to do that. So lifespan has something to do with it, but their lives are cut considerably short. So why, question 2 says, the question comes up about Sarah's seeming lack of faith. Both Abraham and Sarah laughed when they were told they'd have a son, but only Sarah was criticized for doing so, Genesis 17:17 and Genesis 18:10 through 12. How are they different? Perhaps. I don't want us to be influenced by what the question says and how it's worded. Put yourself back in the text for a minute. You and Sarah are going to have a son. Sarah hears this, and what's her response? I'm past the age of childbearing. How is it? Ann, you're going to have a child. She didn't even hear me. Ann, you're going. I think you're going to have a child.
I was like, are you crazy?
Okay.
I've already got 3 sons.
So, I don't see it as so much as a lack of faith, as a understanding of the reality in which she finds herself. What she's criticized for is, the question is, why did she laugh? Is anything too hard for God? And what did she say? But I didn't laugh. Oh no, you laughed.
Yeah, she laughed, but she thought, that's incredible,
The idea, there's a couple of ways to translate this where she said, verse 15, it says, Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. The primary way that's used in the Hebrew is to be in awe or reverence or amazement, not fear. Fear comes further down in the translation list. She said, I didn't laugh because she's amazed by what she's hearing from this person. And so, but he said, no, you did laugh. Which, by the way, tells us, we're not all sinless. We do things and we react in ways that I can see her reacting this way. I don't know if it's a lack of faith so much as it is a sense of, this is unbelievable. Go ahead, Ann.
I take back, I wouldn't have said to the Lord, are you crazy? I would have been amazed though.
There you go. The whole situation in which they find themselves. But God had made a promise. I'll make of you a great nation. And so you think about, with that promise in that 25-year span, when all these things start to be mentioned and the promise of being a great nation, how does Abraham and Sarah try to fulfill that promise?
By giving the handmaid to Abraham to have a child.
You've got Hagar and Ishmael, thinking that that would be an acceptable way to accomplish that. That brings us to our next little section, with the birth of Isaac and Hagar and Ishmael and the problems that they have in Genesis 21. Running ahead of God has consequences. If we think we know better than God and we think we can work God's plan out better than God can work his plan out, there's going to be consequences to it. And here in Genesis 21 now we have the consequences because, in fact, Abraham is born. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had spoken. And she conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. A couple of things point out. The Lord visited her, indicates that she, it can be translated, the Lord was gracious to Sarah. Sometimes we read about God remembering. He remembered Noah. You ever think that Noah's on the ark with all the animals and his family, and God looks down the earth and said, what happened to all the people? Oh, that's right. I forgot where I put them. No, it just means that God fulfills his time. And in the fullness of time, God does these things. And so he allows this to happen. Of course, Abraham has had a child with Hagar already, with Ishmael. What does Isaac's name mean? Laughter. Boy, wouldn't you like that the rest of your life? You're reminded of what you did 25 years ago in that tent. Sarah said, God has made me laugh, and all who will hear will laugh with me. So it's one of those situations where she can look back on and say, I did laugh. And she admits to that. All right. So through the text, we find then that Ishmael is born, and at the age of 2 or 3, he's finally weaned from his mother. And they made a great feast. This would have been common in the days of Abraham and Sarah, kind of a celebration of a child taking another step into life. And at some point, something happens where we find that Ishmael is making fun of Isaac. He's causing some problems here with him. Ishmael is a teenager at this point, and as teenagers do, maybe he thought it would be funny to tease, to mock Isaac in this way. What's Sarah's reaction? He's got to be gone. You've got to get rid of him. Tells Abraham, you've got to get rid of both of them. I don't want them around. She said to Abraham in verse 10, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. The matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. Abraham still loved Ishmael, but God said to Abraham, do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Sometimes, again, we take the position on Sarah. She's awfully harsh here. She's being awfully mean. You've got a teenage boy that's saying things to your son that you don't like, but how can you have them cast out into the wilderness? But what's the big plan here? Does it involve Ishmael? The big plan doesn't involve him. It's Isaac. And even God says, listen to your wife. We've got to deal with Isaac. And so, men, it's good to have your wife's input sometimes. Even though it may not sound to you like it's a reasonable thing, sometimes it's the best thing. And God even says, you need to listen to her because we're dealing with Isaac and not Ishmael. And, go ahead, I bet you're going to say what I'm going to say.
I think in Sarah's case, I want to think there must be some little regret after she helped proceed to have a child. And then, of course, Abraham starts to love this Ishmael, really importantly. And I didn't want there was a little regret, a little jealousy involving right from the get-go after the incident of the child being born.
And what's her big concern is Ishmael's going to get some, or maybe a double portion and a greater blessing than Isaac. And even the Lord says, that's where I'm not too hard on Sarah on this, because even the Lord said Sarah's right. We're blessing Isaac here and not Ishmael. And by the way, Hagar and Ishmael go out into the wilderness. They sit under a tree. They have nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and about ready to die. And what happens? The angel of the Lord shows up and says, I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to give him a great name and make of him a great nation. So God will deal with Ishmael in a different way. But Isaac's the one. Isaac's the child of promise. And so in order to remove Ishmael from that situation, for Isaac to inherit all these things, this had to be done. Sounds harsh, sounds difficult, but It had to be done. Do you have any other comments or questions about that little section? I want to get to the last one about sacrificing Isaac. All right, chapter 22. God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. Time passes. It came to pass after these things. God tested Abraham. What does it mean when God tests somebody? Tempts them to sin, right? God doesn't tempt anyone to sin. Where is your faith, Abraham? Let's see what level we're at now. The level, I don't know, what? How many years ago? 30 years ago? 40 years ago? Is it greater now than it was then? So let's put it to the test. Let's see where your faith is. Take Isaac, your son, your only son of promise, and take him up on the mountain and offer him as a burnt offering. This is abhorrent to some people because of a couple of things. As far as human sacrifice is concerned, is God for it or against it? Against it. Always has been, always will be. But yet here he is telling him to go kill your son and offer it as a sacrifice to me. Is God, I think knowing the nature of God as we do, we don't have to read any further, and I can ask you the question. Sadly, you already know the story. But I could ask you the question, is God going to let him go through with it? No, because we know the nature of God. Where's Abraham at? What's his faith? Where's his level of trust? I've underlined a couple of times. Verse 1, verse 7, verse 11. God said to him, Abraham, he said, here am I. Isaac spoke to Abraham his father, said, my father. He said, here I am. Or here I am. Verse 11, angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here I am. The Lord speaks to Abraham, the angel of the Lord speaks to Abraham, his son speaks to him, and in each occasion, Abraham says, I'm here. And that statement, behind that statement is, here I am, what will you have me to do? Tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it. And so throughout this whole story, Abraham is present in his faith with the Lord and whatever the Lord wants him to do. Of course, we know the story, the great passage where they, verse 5, Abraham said to the young men that went with him, stay here with the donkey, the lad and I will go yonder and worship. He must have been from the hills. We're going yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. Right? All right, I've got to go. The lad and I are going up to this hill, this mountain, and it's going to take 3 days for us to get up there, and I'm going to offer him as a sacrifice, but we're coming back to you. So there's a question in our book, question number 5. Hebrews 11, 7 through 9, gives us some insight to the mind of Abraham here about what Abraham expected to happen. And as time runs short, we'll read this and get your comments. 17 through 19, sorry. By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. He had this son being as good as dead. And if God says he's the child of promise and we've sent Ishmael off and this is the one that everything's going to go through and I kill him in this place, you see the problem? Either God's going to do something miraculous or he's not going to let me go through with this. And so the idea is I'm going to offer him. And by the way, the text in Genesis 22 and the text of Hebrews 11 says he offered him. And not that he almost offered him. That he got to this point and he got close, but he offered him. He offered him when he took the wood and he took the lad and they went up to the mountain. He offered him. All right, one last thing to point out. Isaac says, Father, where is the lamb for the offering? And what did Abraham say? The Lord's going to provide for himself a lamb. John 1:29, behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. Where is the offering for us? God provided his own offering in his Son. We will think about, when we think about Abraham offering Isaac, we think about God offering his only Son and going through with it, of course, even through death. All right, so it's a great lesson of faith. It's a great story of trust and how far Abraham has come from leaving Ur of the Chaldees to now. I think there's some great lessons there about our faith. It's not always going to be great. It's not always going to start off huge, but it will develop and it will grow if we continue to trust God. Any other comments or questions?
I always wonder what could have been going through Isaac's head as Abraham raises the knife, like, what's going on?
That's a good point. I think the book mentions a little bit about that. Isaac is a teenager. He's not a 3-year-old. He's a teenager. He probably has the strength to fight back. He has the strength to get away. But yet he allows his father to bind him as a sacrifice and lay him on the wood and allow to go through with this. And so not only are we looking at the faith of Abraham, you're looking at the faith of Isaac. He trusts his father. He says, where's the lamb? And his father says, God will provide a lamb. Okay, we'll go through with this. And sure enough, God did. All right, good class. Appreciate it.